delightful welcome. I'm really, really thrilled to be here with you all today. As the introduction noted, that I'm originally from upstate New York. I'm from Rochester, New York, so not really too far from here. Very similar weather, maybe lake effect. But I also went to New York City to Fordham University, and then I lived and did a lot of ministry work. And was a teacher in Florida, in Tampa, Florida. And then, really just use this one? Okay, sounds good. Let me leave this one on. Sounds good. And then I moved to New Orleans to work at Loyola Institute for Ministry in New Orleans in 2016. So I'm going on my 7th year. And now I'm the director of the program and just got tenure, so now I'm associate professor. Super excited. That was a long process. So I am absolutely delighted to be here to talk with you about one of my greatest passions in life, and that is ministry with young adults. And so, kind of starting us off, we're going to have our slides clicking on that side over there. So just as an overview of what I'd like to do with you all today, just kind of 3 points. I'm going to talk for like 45 minutes, and I know there's a lot to digest, and I really want time for good conversation. So I'm going to make sure we get some time for Q&A in the end. So just talking briefly about faith development and the sociocultural implications. I wrote my dissertation on kind of like the developmental stages of young adults and the transitional stages that they go through. And it was really eye-opening to me to understand just what daily living might be like when you're, in transition towards adulthood. And also just coming of age today. It's just different than when I was coming of age. I think we all can probably see that. What does accompaniment look like? That's language that we throw around in church talk, and I think that one's a really good one to unpack. And then talking about synodality, and we all know that there is a synod on synodality still unfolding now. But we've had many synods before this, and there are all these ways of listening to the people of God. But also we had a synod on young people before the synod on synodality that was really revelatory and really powerful. And Diana Hancherenko, my dear friend here, who I've served on the National Advisory Team for Young Adult Ministry with, we've done a lot of work together working on that synod on young people and just helping ministry leaders respond to the needs of young people. So that's what I'm going to go through today, if that all sounds good to you, and we'll go to the next one. So Gen Z, people have been talking about millennials for quite a period of time, but now we're working on Gen Z, and that's pretty much people that are 18 to 28 years old now, so it's kind of they're in our 20s. Our Gen Z are basically in their 20s now, born in 95, 97 kind of thing, around 2012, 2013, like that's the generation marker that they're saying. So millennials are still around, they're still in their late 20s, but mostly 30s now, and so Gen Z is our 20s generation coming up. And there's a range of developmental characteristics that are really important to consider when thinking about ministry and accompaniment with young people. Few young people grow up socialized in the faith anymore. I mean, many of us might remember a day when it was just second nature. You went to church, your family went, you knew your neighbors and all those things. That social fabric has really changed and broken down in many ways, And so that sense of socialized faith is not nearly as strong with this generation as a result of that. It's a lot stronger for Hispanic and Latino communities, most definitely, but for Anglo communities, it's broken down a little bit. And so, at this stage, there's mostly, kind of thinking about the adolescent, and early young adult years, you believe what you believe because your parents did, and that's just normal developmentally, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in detail. But it's why, the reason to be Catholic, and things like that is all just because that's what you were raised to do. And if that's not how you were raised to do things, being Catholic isn't nearly as natural as it maybe once was, And so those are just important things to kind of keep in mind. And so a lot of that's kind of I'll have slides on this, like the socialized faith, and that's just changed a lot for young people. Often what they believe is, through a natural process of socialization, happens like through schooling, like your parents, your coaches, your mentors, teachers, things like that. When adolescents and young adults start transitioning to more kind of complex ways of knowing that we'll talk about, young adults start questioning what they believed in, and what they thought was true, what was morally right and wrong, and things like that. And that's a very natural period of time for young adults to move into, but they also need the space and the mentors to ask those questions of. And that's what they're really struggling to find. So this is just kind of a broad overview, kind of right here. And so they're asking deep questions in these years, in the early 20s, even through their 30s. Who are they? Some of them are saying, who am I as a person of God? Most of them are not. They're saying, who am I in this society? Who am I with my friends on social media? And so being a person of faith might not be the first thing many young adults are thinking about. And that's important to know, because if many of us were socialized in our faith growing up, we still just kind of, implicitly expect that of other people. And we just kind of have to break down that assumption and say that might just not be natural for a young person to even talk about their spirituality, to talk about going to church, So to meet them where they are and to not make those assumptions that they should have come of age the way that we did, and things like that. It's kind of the first big thing to kind of think of. And along all these lines are these sociocultural trends that are influencing the way that young adults see the world, and their place in it. And so, Gen Z itself, who are they? Many of them were raised with a tremendous, if you want to go to the next slide, a tremendous array of learning opportunities. Their studies are showing the dramatic rise in the number of parents who have homeschooled. It went from 850,000 in 1999 to 1.8 billion are being homeschooled now. So that socialization of young people in schooling is happening more in the co-op homeschooling session for a lot of young people. There's more and more options for dual enrollment, online learning, magnet schools. They came of age very accustomed to, having closer one-on-one connections with their teachers, in high school very much. And all these learning modalities are at their fingertips. We have Khan Academy, we've got TED Ed, YouTube videos, MOOCs, massive online courses. Anything you want to know how to do, what are you going to do? You're going to Google it, and you're going to look at a YouTube on how to fix your car. There's no shortage of learning modalities for this generation. So if they want to learn more about something, they do it with ease. There's no shortage of information, enabling them to customize the way they learn. So now consider the average confirmation program. Yeah, we can laugh. It's fine. A lot of young people are told by their parents to sit in a church or sit in a classroom and learn about the Catholic faith tradition. And this is young adults looking back on their lives sharing this, because the youth young adult age, very different, but they were all youth at one point, and that shaped them. Their church experiences of parish religion and Catholic school shaped them as young adults in good ways and in not so good ways. So thinking of their learning modalities, they're told to sit in a classroom, learn about their faith, oftentimes from a person that knows very little about the dynamics of youth and young adulthood and coming of age, just kind of told to teach this from a book. And they don't have a lot of training in teaching and pedagogy. They just are told, follow this teacher guide and you'll do fine, in your confirmation program. The vast amount of young adults that we speak to say that their faith formation, and they put that in quotes, or their catechetical instruction, which is more of what it was one of the most boring and painful experiences of their life. And it's not to blame our amazing catechists. This isn't to shed blame on it. It's just to shed light on what they're saying, And so given their access to information, most of them saw no purpose at all in going there. They said, I could Google this. I'll just look up the Catholic faith online. Why do I have to be here? And that's what they're saying. And so what's missing in these contexts is relationships, is deep, meaningful, robust relationships. So most young adults, because of their experience in religious ed, a lot of times, has naturally made them skeptical of parish programs. They're a lot of them said they finally learned, the young adults I've talked to, they said they finally learned so much about spirituality of the Catholic tradition and all the saints and all these things after confirmation, once they went to college or just had a mentor or something. They said, why didn't I learn this when I was in the parish? They said, if this was all, 45 minutes on a Wednesday night is all the church has to offer me, why would I come back to this? I could just look this up online. And I can't blame them, that's reality. Life has changed, and so our programming needs to change too. So they and us, we all are very accustomed to getting what they want with the click of a button. The space that we all live in kind of supports this kind of consumerism. Just think of the word Amazon, not a plug for it. You want to buy a hat, you got 50 million colors you can pick from, you know? I mean, so customization is kind of built into this consumer society that we're living in today. But more to the point, they're used to customizing everything for their lives. Even their partners through online apps. You just swipe in one direction and you don't have to look at that person again. Swipe in another, you might have a date. I mean, it's just customizing who you want to be around, you know? Dating apps, things like that, you know? So they want options rather than hurdles. But it's more than that. Because if there are hurdles and barriers, they'll walk away and find a more convenient or more customized way to get what they want. Good. And so think to yourselves, this is just a prime example, when a young person comes in and they call the parish and they say, "Joyous day, I'm getting married. We'd like to get married in the parish." What do you think they hear? Are you registered? What else?
Baptized for...
Have you been confirmed, baptized? Yep. Questions? What else? Tom?
Are you coming to Mass?
Are you coming to Mass? Very good. Are you registered? Are you coming to Mass? Yep. Go to the next one. Next slide. It kind of maybe scroll through. And I think we named a lot of them, but there's a ton, you know. Oh, go back. And then the other one. Have you come to pre-Cana classes, you know, for 2 years? You got to do all these things first. You're not registered, you know, sorry. You got to be registered. You got to be here for a certain amount of time. Who are your parents and your grandparents? That's another one, you know. And so if they say no to any one of these things, they get married somewhere else that's not a church, you know. So fewer and fewer of our young people are even getting married in our churches, which I think is very evident. But this is part of the reason why. So even if they do try, there's nothing but barriers. And some of them are good. Yeah, you want to be registered. Yeah, you can't just have weddings for everybody. But is that the first thing you want to say to a young adult when they call? It's like, "Oh, are you a member?" That's pretty exclusive. How about, "Oh my God, joyous day. You're getting married. How phenomenal. How did you meet? Are your parents excited? What can we do to support you?" How about that? And then say, "Why don't you come on in? Come see the parish. Why don't we see what we can do?" Then when they come in, maybe ask about some registration. Maybe not. Just accompany them in this meaningful moment in their lives. Get them in touch with a pastor that might marry them. Start a relationship with them. And if you do that, I'll bet you $1 million they want to register for your parish. Don't put it first. That's all it takes. It takes listening, it takes accompaniment, it takes caring deeply. You're getting married? That's huge. You want to baptize your child in our community? This is phenomenal. Instead of, "Are you registered?" You know. So that just changing our language could help when someone calls. If they call, maybe it's an email. Change your email. And so there's a whole litany of questions, you know, that goes on. And so, you know, when faced with all these barriers, these joy-filled moments, you know, a filled day of love and celebration, they move on and they got to break it to their parents. They're not getting married in the Catholic Church because they can't go through these hurdles. My husband's not going to go be Catholic and he doesn't want to go to pre-Cana. And so they just think the doors are closed for them to be participants in the Catholic faith. And that's just not true. There's other ways to be Catholic that don't have anything to do with pre-Cana. They do, and they also don't, you know? But how do they know that if they never get that offer? To say, like, how can we accompany you spiritually in your relationship with your spouse, you know? So in addition, they're also like super savvy with technology, if you want to go to the next one. A lot of them are curating their own apps, for heaven's sakes, like making apps. I don't know how to do that. That's phenomenal, which means like they themselves, you know, like they're making brands on social media. They can be followers, like the number of followers they get is like a popularity thing, and it's like a big deal. So they have a tremendous amount of agency in their lives. They're very accustomed to being agents, leaders, influences in their work lives. They have a sense of leadership and authority in their jobs, in their social lives. They expect this level of engagement in other spaces, like a church. And they seldom receive that from what they tell me. Any recognition of that agency is kind of just cut by the wayside. You know, their leadership potential and actualization for that is more like, "Oh yeah, you could help out, set up the chairs for today." You know, as we look at young people like they're our workers or something, you know, like they're just, you know, "Oh, they can go fix that thing." One of the prime examples, I heard it from several young adults, was during the stay-at-home orders for COVID. They were very much our tech-savvy people. And so our pastors and our leadership in our churches went to young adults and said, can you run the social media for the parish and run the live stream for the Mass? Because we can't be here. And they said yes. But the young adults that I talked to that did that said that they felt guilty because they were at Mass and nobody else could go there. That they were honored to be there, that they could receive communion, but they were the only ones, and everybody was at the doors wishing that they could come in. But nobody was accompanying them through that. So we raised them up to leadership, but didn't support them spiritually. We just expected, because they're good at it, they can do it. But there's a whole accompaniment process missing here. So if you want to raise up the agency and leadership potential, be there for them and say, how is it going now that you're transitioning into this role? What support do you need? In any transition, any leadership transition, we should be asking those questions of our people instead of just saying, oh, I hope it goes okay for you. You know, like that's where burnout comes in. I mean, if we start raising the next generation of young people into ministry leaders, there's a fear they'll burn out because there's so much to do. There's so little resources, all this scarcity, maintenance mode, all those things. I think we're familiar with that language. But where are our spiritual guides? And I'm not talking spiritual directors, those are great. Every one of us in this room could be a spiritual guide and an accompanier to a young person. Just if we took the time to talk to them and form relationships with them, you know? And so given all of these kind of cultural, social, sociological factors that I've kind of been talking about, there's still very important developmental factors. And I'm gonna go into that, I'm gonna try to be kind of fast about it, because I know we'll get short on time here. But there's important developmental factors. So that was a lot of societal stuff. Developmentally, you know, in terms of psychology, you know, constructive developmental psychology, they're shaping their lives and their identities and who they are before God, self, and other. We'll go to the next slide. Research is telling us that they are tremendously lonely, this generation. They long for meaningful connections. They want people to know them in their communities. They want to be seen, known, valued, loved, accepted, belong to something greater than just themselves. And now factoring what we know about faith development, we'll go to the next. Go to the next. There we go. Factoring in what we know about faith development, there's very important transitions that are going on, that they're immersed in all of this time. So we have this compressed set of loneliness that's become an epidemic in this country. I think the Surgeon General just raised our awareness to that a couple months ago. But it's been an epidemic in other countries too. I think in England, 3 years ago, they named it an epidemic there too, you know. So loneliness is on the rise. The breakdown in community is really palatable for our young people. You know, because you can be on social media and you can connect with people, but you can still be isolated in that way too, depending on what's happening on social media. And so all of that with their transitions developmentally from adolescent ways of knowing to young adult years, you know, and they're likely coming to question a lot of things. That transition between being a teenager and entering the young adult years is a time of deep questions, big questions. Who am I? What's my calling in life? These are no small answers. And couple that with loneliness, then it means many of them feel they don't have anyone to talk to about those big questions. It means they don't have mentors in their lives. And when Springtide did that research study on loneliness, and they said, when they said that the percentage of people said that they were deeply lonely, they had no adults in their life. That included their parents. And to me, that was startling. And so we have a breakdown in family life that's compacting this too. So it's not just our young people that need our help, it's our families too that need accompaniment. And so in all of this transition that they're going through, asking these big questions, you know, when they were younger, they didn't have the capacity to ask that. You just did what you did to make your parents happy, you know, like, then you start kind of developing the golden rule, like, oh, it is a good thing to do, not just because my parents said so. Then you start saying, no, what do I think? And you really want to get in from that searching faith to the owned faith. And that can be a very long transition. There's a lot of folks, Fowler's one, John Westerhoff, I'm using him today. There's a couple other folks that have done a lot with faith development. I chose Westerhoff because I like his terminology. So going kind of from affiliative faith to searching faith, it's those big questions. That's that young adult years. And what we're trying to get them to is an owned faith, to always be like, know yourself, know who God's calling you to be, have your own sense of integrity, and make decisions in your life based on who you are and who God's calling you to be. Those are the things we want to be saying to young adults as people in their lives. But when they say they're this lonely, that means those people aren't in their lives saying these things, And so big markers, and gaining new experiences, new friends, maybe even new mentors, new teachers, they start reflecting in these early 20s, to begin thinking about what was right for their lives and why to live a life the way that you would. And that becomes a really lengthy process of development. Their former way of thinking and doing, it doesn't hold up to who they're becoming. The bottom starts falling out of things. You start going into what people call a crisis of faith. Sharon Parks is another author that does a lot on young adults and development, and she calls it the shipwreck moments. The moments in your life where you're like, oh my God, I don't even know who I am. I don't, let alone who God thinks of me. And these can be hard moments, but they can last for several years. I'm not talking like a month. I'm talking, this could be like years of searching. And so what might that look like? What might it sound like? An inability for when you hear a young person to express concretely what they believe in. It might sound like relativism. It might sound like, oh, you just think anything goes. That's okay. Ask them and say, but what do you really think about it then? If you can't decide an abstract idea about morality about somebody else, what do you think? What would you do? And just keep pushing them, It's perfectly normal to hear a young adult say, I don't know, whatever you think is right. I don't know what's right. That's normal. They're transitioning to try to find themselves. But oftentimes we hear that, and adults get this narrative in their mind of like, oh, young people are moral relativists now. Oh gosh, there goes the church. And then we just spin out of control and make programs about morality, Well, that didn't work. Because it's not supporting the fact that they should be getting through this searching to own their faith. To really say, like, now that I've questioned everything, now I know what's true. And I can know it for myself, not because my parents taught it to me, not because my priest said so, but because I believe in it. That's how we want people to live. But instead I'm finding a lot of folks hearing this searching faith and squashing it, being like, oh, we don't question our faith. This is what we believe in, and this is what we're gonna do. You should question things so that you know that they're yours, not question because church teaching needs to change and all those things. It does change at a pace, but it's not about that. It's about finding yourself, So that's part of it. What do we hear? Determining if something's right or wrong, they might say, who am I to judge? That's a perfectly acceptable thing because they're saying what it's revealing, like who am I to judge in that situation, is actually saying, well, I might know what I would do, but I wasn't raised like that person was, so I can't tell them what's right or wrong for them. That's important to name. That means you do have a moral compass and you respect other people deeply, So it's easy that we can think of these things as relativistic. But conversely, as a young, if a young person responds by saying they would do the right thing because they worry what other people think of them, then they're reflecting more in the affiliative faith. So they haven't moved in that developmental stage yet. So they're still doing things because it's how they were raised. And that could happen in your 20s too. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason about development sometimes. It happens faster and slower for some people, And so that's just kind of important things to think about when we're talking with young people, is just the way they might respond might not be what we're expecting, because a lot of times we're expecting an owned faith from a 21-year-old. I don't know that you're gonna get that. Like, you might, but what you're hearing is what their parents taught them, And so if you really get to the heart of it, what we wanna do is grow a robust faith capable of handling the complexity of day-to-day living, because it is hard to live today. We have economic issues, we have climate issues, we have church issues, there's issues everywhere. And it's a lot to navigate with your own job, if you're raising a family, your friends, your relationships. But a strong faith can help you with these things. They've already shown clinically that spirituality can help with mental health issues, and that spirituality now they have found is biological, which means it can be talked about in counseling and developmental theory like it should be, probably isn't yet. But that's a huge marker. I mean, I think we people of faith kind of thought that already, but science is affirming that for us, And if that's the case, and we know spirituality can help with mental health issues and that sense of loneliness, then why aren't we helping them more grow in this more owned faith, to really know themselves, their place in the world with God, self, and others? So that's just kind of some of the big ones, and I won't belabor the point of development, but to me, development is important. The societal effects and our human development and our faith development, and we gotta take these into consideration when we're talking about young people. So kind of in sum, the portrait of young people overall, it's complex. They're gonna find a way to get what they want. They experience no shortage of pathways towards learning about something. And they might express what sounds like indifference or relativism when it comes to faith and morals, and that can be normal. And all the while, though, they're deeply lonely and hungry for meaningful relationships. Adults who care about them and know them deeply, no matter what age you are. So if we go to the next one, if you want to pause for a moment, I said a lot in 15, 20 minutes. Think about a young adult that you know. Is there anything that resonated with you here? Just pause and reflect quietly to yourself. Anything that made you think differently about young adults? Take note of that. We'll have time in a little bit for some Q&A, so keep all those thoughts in mind. If we want to go to the next slide. A lot of times what I find, this is a little like what I'm seeing in churches. So I teach in a graduate program in ministry and theology and religious ed and pastoral studies. And my students are ministry leaders. And so I hear a lot, and they're all over the country, sometimes all over the world. So I hear a lot about different dioceses, different churches, the way things run. But I hear a lot of things that sound really similar from all over the country, and it's about these programming models that we have in a lot of our churches. It's not everybody, but it's a lot of them, And so, unfortunately, what we find in a lot of pastoral spaces is kind of this same old way of thinking that young adults are a problem. We see a statistic like this, all the unaffiliated are growing, and we say, oh my gosh, look at this problem we have to solve. Not, what are these grace-filled lives that we should love and nurture? What is this problem to solve? And if there's one thing we leave with today, it's that young adults are not a problem to be solved, but beautiful gifts of our community to be nourished. But they've been hearing this a lot. We did it with the millennial generation. Nobody cared about the generation before them. That was mine. Just dropped all of them off, those latchkey kids. But we heard it with the millennials, and we're hearing it even more with Gen Z, that there's something problematic because they're leaving the church. Well, maybe what's problematic is the way the church is accompanying them. If we just flip the script and look internally and say, maybe it was us instead, what would look differently in our parishes then? How would ministry change? How would programming change? So a lot of times, if we go to the next slide, there's a lot of, there's all of these, the going, gone statistic, and this one, it still hits me really hard, is that the median age that a young person decided to leave the church was 13, which means they were probably in our programs or our Catholic schools, right in front of us, and said, nope, this isn't for me. Thanks, but no thanks. And so I hear all of these people saying, oh, don't move the confirmation age, because they'll never come back if we do the restored order. So confirmation is a way to get people to come to your church? That's gross. Absolutely should not be that. It's a beautiful sacrament. And it should be a beautiful process of accompaniment, but right now it's keeping them in our pews. Well, look what it's doing. At age 13, they're like, I'm out of here. So what is the point of making them come to this confirmation if it ain't working? Maybe rethink that in an intergenerational mentoring kind of a way, If we go to the next slide. So the approach of fixing the problem isn't really working. What happens is with all of these statistics, they're like, oh, the morality, people's morality is low in this generation. Oh, they're not coming to church, so let's get more programs that get more church attendance and stuff like that. But that you might get some more people in the beginning, but then all of a sudden they stop coming. And so it's this kind of programming model of like, create a program to fix this problem, the statistic told us. Statistics are not going to tell you about the people in your community. They are very good to show you large generalization trends that might be seen in your community, but you will not know if this is true for your young people unless you ask them, because they might not have been polled. And more importantly, wouldn't you like to know about their interior lives? This won't tell you about that. It's just a statistic. So click to the next one. So first, look at people as opportunities and not problems. Because our parish vitality decreases with every single young person who leaves the church. We do believe the church is the body of Christ. Any young person that leaves diminishes that body of Christ. We have to care about that. That has to be on our hearts and on our minds. We have to love them, not problematize them. Pope Francis talks about all the time. Just witness with joy. That would be great. If we go to the next slide, is Evangeligatium. I mean, he's not pulling punches here. An evangelizer must never look like someone who just came back from a funeral. Because that's what he's seeing on people's faces. My poor students that are involved in RCIA, and so they're coming down with the book. I'm not good with liturgical language, sorry. So they have their folks for RCIA, they're coming to Mass, they're coming down the aisle with the book, and it's just... And these are people coming into the church, and everyone in the church looks miserable. They're like, could you just smile, please? Just for the walking down with the people coming into the church. They want to be here, and they just look miserable. And so I was like, oh, he ain't wrong. It looks like you're in a funeral sometimes, There's Christians whose lives seem like Lent without Easter. Yeah. For all this, I repeat, let us not allow ourselves to be robbed of joy, and the joy that is evangelization. And so that transitions me into saying, the next slide here. There's this beautiful, that's all right, we'll figure it out. There's this beautiful way of accompanying people, and we have it in Scripture, and it's the road to Emmaus. And the road to Emmaus can be told differently depending on who would like to share it. I've heard people say, oh, Jesus, was listening and walked along and broke open the Scriptures. I was like, oh, you missed a couple big steps there. Like, the whole listening part's got to be really well thought out. The first thing that Jesus did when he rose from the dead in Luke's gospel was listen. Listen. He didn't break open the Scriptures. He listened first. And if that's not a model of ministry, I don't know what is. If you want to click the next part. Pope Francis, in his encyclical on young people, Christus Vivit, he pulls this out very, very strongly. And I have to read it. And so he says, we hear this kind of listening when the Lord walks alongside the disciples on the way to Emmaus, even though they're going in the wrong direction. This is what he means by accompaniment. They might not be making good choices. They might not think the church is for them. They might not want anything to do with their faith. One young adult told me that the lowest time in her life was when nobody was checking in on her. Jesus was going in the wrong direction with them. And he planned to go farther. And it was because of his hospitality of listening that they chose to turn around. It was their initiative. It was the Lord at work in their hearts. And they said, oh, let's go back. He didn't do it. Pope Francis makes this real clear. So there's, I think, a lot of ways of skipping over that. We can read the road to Emmaus a lot of different ways. This is the way I prefer to read it. Those scriptures came open. And when he cracked open those scriptures, which he did do, he was doing it because of what they said. He didn't just come and be like, I brought the scriptures with me today. He was like, you said you believed this. Why are you faltering on it now? He listened to them and got them back in touch with themselves and God at work in their hearts. He didn't just give them a book of doctrine and be like, don't just believe the scriptures. He was like, you told me you believed this. If you believe it so strongly, shouldn't we be doing it? And they're like, oh, crud, you might be right. I mean, that's accompaniment to me, you know? He didn't just hit them over the head with doctrine. He got them in touch with what they believed. So if we go to the next slide. Right here. And so no matter how much someone tells you they don't care, it's irrelevant, accompany them. Share with them your life. And what the Synod on Synodality is hopefully teaching us, and what I'm hoping to do, we have a beautiful, beautiful Lilly grant to do for Loyola, to do ministry with young adults, and they are very interested in helping parishes do this. And so we have launched our grant, and we're working with St. Angela Merici, which I'm very excited about, one of our 7 parishes across the country right now, to do innovative ministry with young adults. And what we're doing is synodal. It's listening. It's creating well-facilitated listening sessions. And what has happened, and I'll just give you my experience of why listening is so powerful. I worked with a group, and this is how I envisioned the grant, was my work that I did, and Diane and I worked with National Dialogue. And what we did was create listening guides and facilitation guides for ministry leaders and for parents to engage in listening sessions, and then learn how to do that, and then go invite young adults into listening sessions. And so this was all before the Synod on Synodality. This was leading up to the Synod on Young People in 2018. And so we've been doing listening for quite a while in many, many spaces. And so what happened was I worked with a group that was at a Catholic school, and they wanted to re-engage the young adult alumni in the community. And I said, you want to try this out? So I met with them. I pitched the idea of what it means to do this kind of listening. And, just 3 questions that you can ask. What do you love about your faith or the church? What brings you great joy? What has challenged you or let you down about the church and your faith? And what can we do together to move forward? Those would be 3 great questions to ask any young person. And when we asked them, so I facilitated a session with the ministry leaders, the stakeholders, the teachers, whoever wanted to be a part of it. But shared of their life first. We have to know our spiritual journey first, because we have to be able to share that with a young person. Like sometimes what I have my students do is create a spiritual autobiography, and I have a slide for that. If you want to flip to that slide, that's fine. It's just thinking of all we'll skip through all that stuff, all the highs and lows and of your life and where God was. And if you can help a young person do that with their life and say, well, where did you find great compassion and great joy in moments in your life? And if they can name it and say, well, maybe that was God. Great joy comes from God. They might not be able to name God's activity in their lives, but if you can share God's activity in your life with joy, not like you're at a funeral, then they could see themselves in that. But too often we're standing with a book and we're saying, learn this stuff right here. And there's no personal connection from the teacher, the ministry leader, the parent. It's just, no, you just gotta do it. They don't gotta do nothing anymore. But if they could be invited into understanding God's plan for their lives, wouldn't that be something? So our field project is doing just that. So when we held listening sessions, the goal is to host listening sessions, train the trainer, kind of a thing, and then have ministry leaders now be the ones that can host their own listening sessions. So when I did this with the group that was working in the Catholic school, they immediately started, they said, okay, what do we do next? We processed everything we heard, and I said, okay, what do you want to do next? They said, well, we were going to go out to the disaffiliated, but I think that's a bad idea. Let's start with the affiliated. So they called the young adults they knew that were in the community, that were alumni of the school, and they said, would you come in and, we want to hear it. We just invited them into their homes, into a coffee shop, into a space that wasn't necessarily the church, and said, we want to hear from you about your faith and your life and check in with you. Do you want to come and talk with us about that? Just me and my wife, whatever. And one of them said, I was so nervous to have them in my home, like they were going to think this was stupid, and he was just kind of nervous about it. He said, they showed me the greatest hospitality in my own home. There was about 5 young adults that came, and they said, first of all, I didn't think anybody ever cared what I thought about the faith. No one's ever asked me these questions before. Life of Catholic school, no one ever asked them that. Can we do this again next month and more regularly? So they just formed a small Christian community by listening, just pointing that out. My friends that have left the church would really like to do this too. Can I invite them next time? Those are 3 of the most powerful things I've heard from one listening session with 5 young adults. And there was like 5 of those sessions with more young adults. And that was an overlapping theme. We didn't think anyone cared what we thought. So why be a person of faith if nobody else cares? I wouldn't, But that they also knew the reason why their friends left, and that this would have helped them come closer to their faith again. So my biggest takeaway today is accompaniment is about listening, but it has to be intentional. And I know there's a lot of generational challenges, like older generations are like, I don't know how to talk to young people. Don't listen to them. Don't talk then. Just say, how's it going in your life? I really care. Can I help you? Would it help you if I shared a story of my life? Or do you just, it's called the ministry of presence, or do you just need me to be here? A lot of times with the mental health issues that we're finding with young people, there's all these thoughts that everybody needs to be a counselor now and that counseling's gonna help. Counseling's great, but what they're finding is they just needed someone to listen to them. So couldn't each one of us be that person in at least one person's life? And then get them in touch with somebody else. Create a mentoring community. It's not one person's job. That socialization we had when we were younger, that's gone. We have to create that again. And it has to be intentional. So rather than wagging our fingers at our young people and problematizing them, let's tell them they're loved and we miss them. And we want them to know that God loves them. So I'm going to end with that. I could keep going, but I want to take some questions. Okay, you've got your own. Okay. Anything resonate with y'all? Anything? What's back? Oh, go ahead. We got one in the back. Sorry. Of course it will.
So there were 2 points that really struck me today. And the first one, you made the comment about there are no adults in their lives. And in my family, we have a young man who came out as trans. And what ended up happening, and this was really weird, and it's really given me a lot of pause, is when he came out, he wanted us to immediately accept the change. And it gave me pause because I realized, and it took me a few months to put a name to this, we weren't given the opportunity to mourn the person that was, to accept the person that is now here. And I feel like that tends to happen a lot, where you have to accept me immediately. Well, I want to accept you, but you have to give me a chance as well. So that's my first thought, and I don't know if you want to address that or not.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is, can you express that and say, this will be a journey for me too? And immediately say, I accept you, God loves you. God loves all of us. No one's going to say that you're not loved by God. And if they do, that's really harsh, But I've had a lot of folks say to me something very similar, and all my only advice that I would give, and I'm not, going to go giving solid advice everybody should follow, but just articulate that and say, I love you, God loves you, this is new for me too. So if we can accompany each other here, and if I say something wrong, I get the wrong pronoun, I get whatever it is, just can you politely remind me and say, and I will try and do better. Just keep naming it. That's all I know is communication, but keeping it open. So what was your second point? Yeah.
My second point, and this is because I am a religious ed leader,
Yeah.
is that...
Yay, by the way. You're my people.
Yeah, this is a people who's going to have a nervous breakdown this year.
No, you're going to be fine.
So you made the comment about the catechist and, they don't have a lot of knowledge.
Some don't, some do. I don't want to be too broad.
No, I concur with that because that's what you always hear. Is I don't know enough.
Yeah.
Well, we don't want you to know everything. You don't need a Ph.D. to be a catechist. And my approach is I want you to be present.
Yeah.
A lot of what you're doing in the classroom should be present.
Yeah.
To make those connections. And yet, I'm hearing that you said, well, they're not learning anything, they don't see any purpose to it and all of that. Well, if our catechists are not being told and being trained, train mine, very much to be present and to find people who genuinely care and want to be in their lives and are giving of this time away from their own families to be with other children, how is that not being reconciled
So some of
I
the
think that disconnect there.
yeah, some of the things that I found, like, you know, a lot of times, you know, my own religious educators are like, oh, we just need a warm body in that room. I was like, oh my God, stop saying that. Like, we need people that love children to be in that room, you know. And so, but part of that is like, can we actually help our catechists share their story, you know, instead of just using the book. So a lot of times what I find is people are like, okay, here's the guide, here's the teacher, go into that classroom. And they're just kind of thrown into it. And that's not their fault. That was, you know, like, it's a struggle to find people. We have a huge volunteer crisis in our church, and I recognize that. But what are we supporting them when they're in there? So you're training catechists, that sounds great, you know. But is everyone doing that? Are we how are we training them, you know? And is it just to use the guide, the teacher's guide? And like, when I look at those teacher's guide, I was talking with teachers in a Catholic school recently, and you know, they wanted to kind of revamp the curriculum, just kind of, instead of just doing PowerPoints and lectures, like, what can we do? And so they gave me a snapshot of their teacher's guide that they had to use. And it's similar in parishes, I think. And the questions on the margins that you're gonna ask the students, like, oh, okay, can you describe a time that, or it wasn't even that, it was like, you know, how would a person in this situation respond to whatever scripture or whatever? And they would just go in the book and look it up and give an answer, so they give an answer. And I was like, just change that to say, how would you respond? Like, just change the language to say, in your life, in your experience, how would you responded to that? Have them talk in small groups, form community with one another, share how you would have responded at their age. You know, like, just getting more dialogue in there. So even just small changes to our programming material, they don't have to say an answer. The way the things are written that I've seen, you don't have to give an answer that comes from you. You can give an answer that came from, oh, I don't know, this kid I knew over there, maybe he did that, this family did that, the book said this. It doesn't have to, it's not asking them the interiority of their lives. So even just changing it to be really directed at what would you do in this situation, just change the language to be about them, and then teach people how to share their stories with authenticity, you know, times when they struggled with their faith. Because our young people, they're looking at people like us, ministry leaders, like, we're on this pedestal, and they're never gonna make it to that. I don't know, somehow they got that impression, and is that because we can't be vulnerable with our young people and say, no, I had a crisis of faith too. I left the church in my 20s and I came back. Sometimes we're ashamed or afraid to say how our faith has been rocky, you know, and there's some times when we gotta be a little honest with fidelity to what's right, and safe environment's important too, you know. But to really say, like, no, I struggled too. And you know who else did? Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, Mother Teresa. Like, the whole tradition has had a challenge at times in their lives with their wrestle with God. I think we gotta show that a little bit more, but it means being vulnerable and saying, like, man, I didn't have it all together. But if our young people could hear that, so if we could get our catechists to name their story, and other things that help are just model classrooms, you know. So just have all the kids, you know, 2 kids in one class, and model the way a lesson could be, and then have the catechist watch it, and then they come back the next week and they try the same thing. That was one of the greatest things I ever learned at one of my schools, was we would have a substitute for the day, go into your classroom, cover your class while you watched a new pedagogy that was happening that you didn't know how to do. And it was awesome, and I felt supported by that. And I talked to that teacher, like, oh my God, I tried this and it failed. And then you created a community of catechists, basically, that are trying new things and trying to connect with the kids. So let's not just give them a book and say, run with it. Let's say, here's what to do with this book. Here's how to accompany, and just share their journey with them. I think that's the biggest thing, is getting people to share their lives with them. And do a ministry of presence, too. What else? Over there. 2 over there. 2 in the same direction. There you go.
transition from, a lot of us went to school locally, close. The younger generations, once they leave high school, they're going away to college, moving to big cities. What do you know, I've got a daughter that's in D.C. I mean, my son is running a community in Pittsburgh, but even, like I said, once you go away to college, particularly away from home, where do you find that community?
Yeah. Well, and that's a big challenge, because the crisis of communities everywhere. So you could have it strong here, and they move and they can't find anything. I'm accompanying a few young adults that have moved to New Orleans that are struggling to find young adult ministries and parishes there and things like that. So it's hard, but it's also, I think it takes changing our focus, again, from that programming model of like, oh, we have this event and 50 young adults came, or whatever it is, to say, we're gonna prepare you for wherever you go in your life. You know, to say, like, here's how to be a person of faith in your job, when you're moving, when you don't know how to discern your calling in life, like teaching them those things and knowing that they're out there. First off, if we know them and we have their young adults, you have their numbers, their social media, connect with them and say, hey, you've been gone for a year, we miss you, how's life going? And accompany them. So we can accompany people from afar really, really well these days. So we can still do that. And if they're struggling to find community, be there for them in a remote way and say, I struggled too, but I tried this, I tried that. Find people in that area. Sometimes adults listen to adults instead. Like maybe there's other folks in other cities that you could connect them to. So always think about how you can connect them more deeply, or just talk with them about their faith, talk with them about their lives, and that means a lot. So maybe they're not going to church, but are they still finding God active in their mind and in their lives? That would be huge if they were. Are they struggling to find community? Well, maybe form something in the old, here, have a little online thing and do something on Zoom. Maybe they'd like that, but we can be creative with those things, I think. But they are going to be transient. They got to find work, most aren't even going to college anymore because they can't afford it, And so, but how do we help them name their agency, walk into a parish and say, hey, I'd like to be a part of this. And they might get ignored. Trust me, they might get ignored. But to keep trying, to keep persevering, but to be there for them, even if they're not physically here. That's kind of all I can think to say. Because it's going to keep happening. They move. A lot of us move. But yeah, go ahead. Was it Tom?
Dr. Lamont, thank you for your comments about accompaniment. I can really relate to that, especially in the relationships I have with young adults. Thanks for encouraging me to continue to do that. I'm curious if you could say something about the crises that Generation Z faces. I'm thinking gun violence, or I'm thinking environmental degradation, and how it relates to the way we can accompany them in their spiritual and faith life.
That's a wonderful question. All that's going on in society, my nephew, I'll use him as an example. He's in a state where they're just allowing open carry. He's petrified. He wants to study remotely for high school because he doesn't want to get killed in school by being shot to death. Like, he's petrified of that at the age of 16. So many young people are crippled by climate change right now. And these are the big things affecting their lives. The way that affects your life, it affects your faith. Like, those are not disconnected things. And what young people want to see is people in churches on the front lines of these things, doing good in the world. What something Dr. Barbara Fleischer always used to say is to ask, is your parish a good neighbor in its community? Is it helping? Does it work with the social services that are around there? Does it advance policies that would be for the good of children? Like, our churches have the capacity. There's this beautiful book Jeffrey Stout wrote called Blessed Are the Organized. And he was looking through, like, the IAF, the industrial area, whatever, the Saul Alinsky kind of groups, like the grassroots organizing things across the country. And he actually went to New Orleans after Katrina to watch how the Jeremiah, and they're faith-based groups that do community organizing. Jeremiah and Isaiah were the two groups there at the time. And through all of his research in all of these cities that he went to, his number one point was, when the churches were on board, change happened. And when they were not on board, it was even harder to make change happen. So we have a power in our faith communities to advocate for social justice and environmental justice. Are we doing it, or are we just focusing on sacramental preparation? It's hard. I know a lot of churches are in maintenance mode, and I get it. This is a hard time to be in a church. We have people that aren't coming back after COVID. We have all these challenges facing us. But can we stop and be visionary and be people in our communities that say, we're going to help. We're going to be here and we're going to help. Young adults want to see that. When they see that, they join you. And so the things that are most pressing on them, churches can do something about that. We can form a voice. A diocese can do something about that. You can lobby your governor for better policies for young people. Whatever it is that you think it needs to be. Maybe it's emissions issues for climate change. But I think if you got yourself organized as parishes and said, how do we actually be people in the world as people of faith and work for change, young people would follow you. I would bet my money on that. I hope. I don't have a lot, though. Is that it? Are we up? Okay.
thank you very much. I think you've given us some very good points.